Okay, great. So welcome to today's webinar. Just as we are getting started, it'd be great to know whereabouts in the world you're joining from. I'm joining from Belfast in Northern Ireland. You're all very, very welcome to today's session. Today's session is going to be fairly practical and interactive. So if you can ask your question throughout. Just while we're waiting, I'm going to ask a quick poll. Idea here is we're going to try and keep this as interactive as possible. So as we're getting warmed up here, if you can maybe just let me know what is your top priority for 2023. Could be understanding the drivers of NPS or employee satisfaction or whatever it happens to be. Do you want to link your improvements in either customer employee experience to business impact? Is it more about trying to get more from your existing tech stack? So again, trying to keep this as interactive as possible. And while you're doing that, I will take a quick sip of tea and then we'll get going here. Okay, so in the Q&A, if you could just let me know where in the world you're joining from so that as questions occur to you, you'll be able to put down your questions. So far into the Q&A, whereabouts in the world you're joining, just put that in as a question. Chat, unfortunately, is disabled, but we're going to use Q&A to get going. So there's Michelle from UK. So you're very welcome, Michelle. Julia from Minnesota. Oh my word, Cleveland, Utah, USA, New York, and Paris, Charlotte. You're very welcome. So we can see it's almost like the golfing tournament. We're split down the middle here in terms of Europe and USA. So maybe if you let me know, there's Tom from the USA as well, and Fanula from Belfast. There we go, fantastic. Super. So, and it's great to see familiar faces. Faith from England, hope you're keeping well. Bob from Philadelphia. So there we go. Mike has a golf handicap of 8. So obviously you're pretty good at the golf, Mike, so thanks for letting us know. So you now all know how to use Q&A. You're all very welcome. We've got a very diverse audience joining from across the world. My objective really is to be extremely practical in terms of the resource I'm going to provide today. So I'm going to get quite tactical in that I'm going to show you how you can move closed questions to open questions. I'm going to give you some context setting about, why this is important, why now we should be thinking about this, 7 ways that you should be asking open-end questions. And then we're going to go to, I suppose, a more fundamental kind of upgrade of how you think about getting feedback from your customers or employees. So I'm going to give you 3 actions with 3 examples. And then if you stay to the end, you're going to get a present. So won't let you know until the end. So that's part of the intrigue. And yes, I believe the slides will be shared, and I believe it's recording as well. So you'll get a recording of that. So just by way of introduction, my name is Chris Johnson. I'm the CEO of Adobe Board. And I thought to open today's session, we're all zoomed out. So this is an opportunity for you to sit back, listen, and just get a quick overview of what we do. So I'm going to go off screen, I'll come back on, and then we'll get straight to it. So there we go. That's just a quick overview of what we do. We quantify human emotion. We turn that into what we call decision-ready insights, and then our customers use that to create better business outcomes. So apologies, potentially the audio wasn't great. Just to kick off some value, I'm going to show the results of the survey. So we can see that 15% want to understand the drivers of NPS and CSAT. 60%, this is crazy, want to link CX improvements to business metrics. That's crazy. That's we've run the survey a couple of times, and that's by far the biggest response, which tells me a few things, and the need to link your experience data to operational metrics, and then also how do you support business case to make improvements to either customer employee experience. So maybe if we get to that, we'll chat through. So roughly, just to give you a top level, about 30%, third of you are saying that you need to understand drivers to improve NPS CSAT or improve your actual metrics. Crazy 60% want to link your improvements to business metrics, so dollar to value in terms of what you're doing on your programs, and then only 10% want better value from their CX stack. So thanks so much for taking us through that. I just want to frame the challenge, I think, and it kind of speaks to the 60%. So I kind of see this when I'm speaking to organizations, particularly in North America, but also in Europe, that the key challenge, and I'm kind of calling it the crossing the NPS chasm, but replace NPS with CSAT, effort score, employee engagement, right? There's this challenge that as CX leaders, you need to bridge the gap between metrics, so the metric you're trying to improve, and the why, to ultimately understand the drivers. So the challenge with all these programs and trying to quantify customer feedback is that NPS or metrics will do an amazing job of telling you what has happened. So it will give you a grade of 1 to 10, but you need to link that to the why. And ultimately, I think you need to then understand how you change that. So how could you get predictive to use the comments to actually drive a future engagement? So hopefully that makes sense. That's just framing the challenge. Most of surveys are really good at capturing the closed questions. So you're really good at creating these dashboards, you know, that link, you know, the performance based on questions you've asked. The challenge is understanding the why and to make that leap. And the opportunity here is really clear, that the text data that is locked away is going to be your competitive advantage. So going into 2023, the text feedback that you have locked away, if you can leverage it in a good way, can be a really competitive advantage if you figure out. Part of that is rethinking your touch points. Open-end question is just one part in that formula, and I'm going to show you, you know, how you could think about that more broadly. And this is really driven by the fact that in the next kind of 5-10 years, the majority of data that your organization will hold will be unstructured data. So that unstructured data will be video, voice calls, you know, text feedback, and all the rest. So your challenge is to you know, understand the drivers, but then linking that to your business impact and the operational metrics. So we're all on the same page. We're all together on this, and this is just some form of context setting. So you're probably going, well, how do you do that? If we're talking about moving from closed questions to open questions, you know, how do we actually you know, leverage that information once we get it? Now, technology has come on leaps and bounds. And just for context setting, so when we're talking about open-end feedback, we're really talking about the text analytics or the text data that you're going to collect from your customers' employees. And just to give you a potted history of how this has kind of been transformed. So the first approach to text mining was in the early 50s, and it was known as keyword retrieval. So this came out of IBM. It was the ability to kind of retrieve keywords, and really that first generation was almost about retrieval of information and collating information together. The challenge has been, well, how do we extract information from that? And this next generation that you'd be aware of is really around trying to summarize opinions, focusing on what you would be familiar with of sentiment analysis, which is positive, negative, and neutral. And really, the next era is really about narratives and storytelling. So how can you, from the text data, tell a story, and how can you kind of build that story from the ground up, and ultimately thinking about using different techniques, such as emotion AI, concept extraction, narrative building, and those type of techniques. So great thing is that, if surveys were being created today, they might just have open-ended questions. But because technology wasn't about, it's easier to ask closed questions because you get loads of numbers, you get percentages, really easy to digest. Your leaders are going to get really frustrated if you're presenting dashboards with percentages and all the rest, because typically the answer you'll get is the so what, what do we actually do with that? So we need to go deeper. And fundamentally, what I'm suggesting is to kind of challenge your own status quo. So as we're going to talk through some of these practical examples here, we're fundamentally saying, what's the prize of moving from what you're doing today to the goal? So typically, how you're viewing your customers is really in black and white, which is, it's quite binary. It can be quite blunt in terms of nuance, of understanding. And really where you want to get to is ultra high definition. So you want to add color to create these decision-ready insights. When you present them to your decision makers, they can, inhale the insight within a couple of seconds, start to connect the business context and say, yep, we've got this operational decision. We're going to bring that initiative forward, or we're going to reprioritize different programs. Want to move from this idea of sentiment analysis, which is treating your customer as a percentage. So you're saying our customers are 30% positive, 20% neutral, 20% negative, or whatever it happens to be, to actually understanding there's an emotional intensity, and those intensities can help you predict, the behaviors and actions. We also want to think about the stories we want to tell. So storytelling, data visualization is going to be really important in the next 12 months. And we want to move away from word clouds, which are great, visually. They're a bit like pie charts. The data visualization experts say, pie's best left for dessert, really enjoyable, but not all that substantial and full of sugar. Typically, so kind of gives you that boost that you've seen something interesting, but actually when you get to understanding, it can be lacking. So we kind of want to make that change. And then fundamentally, this is more a kind of an approach to move away from thinking about your customers, employees as numbers, to thinking about them as people. So that's kind of hopefully the context for today. By all means, at this point, fire in any questions. Yeah, I've got a question from someone saying, open-ended questions in a customer satisfaction survey, we'd be able to use this in a better way. So yep, that's the purpose of today's webinar. We're going to go through how you understand better open ends, and I use acronyms such as NPS, so maybe I'll slow down and just kind of give you that context before we jump in. So I want to get really practical. So this is just an idea of examples of close-ended questions. So you can see that, how these questions are phrased. They start with would, did, was, do, are, and they're all really kind of driven by yes and no. So would you recommend our product or service? Yes, you know, that will give you a stat that says 30% of our customers would recommend using our product. Was our training process sufficient? Maybe yes, no, whatever. So these are closed questions, typically answered by ticking a box or multiple answers or whatever. But ultimately, what comes out of this is a binary number, which again is useful from the perspective of what is happening, kind of general summarization, but actually getting to the why can prove challenging. So I'm going to show you how you can move these questions to open end. So our next slide will kind of focus on that there. So instead of would you recommend a product or service, you're wanting to ask what are the main reasons you chose our product or service. So what I'm suggesting is, from a closed end questions, it's a subtle reframe of how you would rephrase that. Would you consider using our product or service again? Yes or no? What would make you use our product and service again? Again, that's getting to the more descriptive narrative to actually give you more insight. And did you experience good customer service? Yes or no? How did you feel about our customer service? So you're inviting people to share their opinions. And we can go on. So hopefully you get the understanding that we're trying to reframe the questions to allow people to describe things that we may not know. So that's the value of open ends. You're capturing information that typically won't be captured in a closed question. So hopefully that is useful. These examples will be given to you after today's session. So do you think this is a good working environment? You would reframe that to ask, how would you describe your working environment? So again, hopefully these examples are giving you an understanding of how you would approach this. So that's just a bit of a reframe of how you would do it. Some practical examples. Hopefully, through repetition, you kind of get the notion of what we're trying to achieve. So, what are the guidance points for you as practitioners to do this reframe? So, I'm going to give you 7 points in the next 2 slides that'll give you some food for thought about how you can use these as kind of principles to kind of reframe, moving from, right to left, closed questions to open ends. Again, please let me know if there's any questions. So the first one is, when you're thinking about open-ended questions, only address one topic at a time. So typically people are trying to cram in what they want to know. So they're leading the witness in some respects, and they're asking multiple things. So, instead of asking for one thing, they're asking for, how do you feel about the office environment, working hours, management, pets in the office, all that there good stuff. So being clear that you only want to address one topic at a time is really important. Clarity of language is super important as well. So as practitioners, we get really excited about, concepts around belonging and psychological safety, and all of these here kind of buzzwords, even Net Promoter Score, NPS, I used that acronym at the start. All of that does is create a barrier between you and your audience. So you want to be super simple in the clarity of your language, and maybe test that out with people outside your immediate facility to kind of you could even run your survey with friendlies internally, just to kind of get a dry run before you do it. The second thing is design for open-end capture. So this is really about the how you frame the question. So you can give people a pre-learned reference point. So if I was to say, could you sum up your feedback on, how do you feel about the service you received in a tweet to your CEO? So automatically they're thinking, all right, 245 characters. So they're starting to think, okay, I typically write a wee bit of a paragraph when I draft a tweet. So that might be a way to to kind of design for more open-ended capture, and obviously designing to ensure that your open-end capture box is inviting and you're trying to elicit feedback as well. So there's just, if we look at the fourth principle, frame the question to encourage description. So you can see that I've highlighted the what, how, where, and explain just as kind of openers and prompters. So the first word is can be pretty critical, because that's kind of reference point for the context. So what is your favorite thing about working here? How do you find your experience at the Hilton? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Explain to me why you chose this company. So hopefully they're all practical, they're useful. You know, hopefully there's a couple in there that you're already aware of, a couple of new ones to take us away as well. So I'll just go through the last three. So you'll all be aware of, you know, the importance of asking why, and the 4 whys, and, you know, the infamous TED talk around, you know, the value of why and all the rest. But it's to be used with caution in open-end. And so what happens when you ask why? You're almost asking for an explanation, can come across as quite defensive. So the example of why would you not recommend their brand? Why did you provide that response to question 3? Again, you can reframe that to the what, how, where, and explain, or describe, or use those adjectives that are getting people to think in those active terms. And then just kind of on the generic final questions. So we typically lead our surveys with closed questions, and there's certainly a place for that. In terms of the academic research, in terms of kind of brain calories and warming up your audience, you potentially open with a closed question that gets them kind of, you know, responding, and then getting them into a reflective mode. So, and again, that's kind of using how we think, you know, the system 1 and 2. System 1, relying on, between system 1 and 2, we're relying on numbers, and then more reflective views of how we describe things. So, you know, the open ends, any other comments, you know, any final questions, I would avoid. Because you're kind of, what you're doing is you're telling your user and your customer that you're viewing them as any other comments. So you're putting what they are really important to them last. I would usually just ask 2 things, 1 metric and an open end. The classic is avoid open but closed questions. So I've seen this in employee experience data for one of the largest CPG brands in the world. And they've asked, what is the one thing that you would change? Guess what happens when they get the response? It's 1-word question, 1-word answers, which are not insightful at all. So it's kind of avoiding the open but closed questions. So do you like working here? Yeah. Have you had a positive experience at this hospital? Will you purchase again from us? So it's trying to suspend your biases and everything else to take a more objective view when you're trying to open to get more open-ended questions. So maybe just pause there. I see there's a couple of questions coming through now, so maybe just use this piece to chat through as well. Okay, so I'm now going to hopefully, you know, just to summarize where we got, you know, we set the scene, why it's going to be critically important. You've told me at the start, 60% of you guys need to connect your experience data to business impact. So how are you going to do that? Well, best way to do that is to get more prescriptive with your insight. We're going to do that through open-ended questions. Once you've captured that data, and we partner with Qualtrics, they're a fantastic company. You know, majority of our clients, customers use Qualtrics or Medallia. You know, you want to rethink, well, how do you actually analyze that there? I'm just going to maybe just pause here for a second. People talking about sentiment analysis for survey responses, specific cloud for sentiment analysis. I'm going to cover that in a second. Henry, will you cover technologies 100%? How do you account for people who refuse to answer open-ended questions? those who leave them blank, and how this is skewing the findings. And then Julia is asking, could you clarify point 6? Are you saying it should or should not be at the end? Okay, so maybe just quickly chat with Steve. So there's a broader piece here around feedback. So for feedback is you ask the question, you acknowledge the response, and then you take an action, and then you go back and say what action that you take. The challenge now with surveys is, and I've seen this data, where you're asking your customer, I really value your opinion. Will you please tell me how we can improve? And then 2 weeks later, they get another survey asking them the same question. So I think that the broader challenge here is around survey fatigue. So to Steve's point here is, people refuse to answer open-ended question because A, they think you're not going to take an action, so it doesn't really care. And B, that they've already told you and you haven't taken the action. So I think, what I'm trying to encourage you to do subtly is a bit of a reframe in the overall approach to say, is surveys ripe for disruption? I think so. And we'll maybe cover that off in a second. Julia's question around generic final questions. My recommendation is that avoid any other comments. So I think that using any other comments is basically treating your customer like any other comment. So you're asking them, having asked them the world, you've just asked them like 100 closed questions, what do you really think? So you're saying, here's all the things that I want to extract from you as a customer. And by the way, what's your opinion? What I'm saying is flip that and lead with one metric and an open end as a suggestion. Hopefully that helps you. So I'm going to reframe this to say, we've now got open-end questions. How do we upgrade our analytics to get more prescriptive insights, connect that to an operational metric, and ultimately monetize and extract value to increase the value you provide your customer, but also enhance the value you deliver in the organization. So to do that, I'm just going to give you a bit of context about what we do, but I'm going to be very practical in the examples that I use. So what Adoreboard does is we quantify human emotion. We're going to tell you why that's important in a second. We turn that into what we call decision-ready insights. The reason why it's called decision-ready is that your job as a CX or EX professional is to tee up the insights for your decision makers to connect that to a business context. It avoids you getting into recommendation fatigue and allows your decision makers to connect that to the operational impact. So that's just to give you a bit of context. We do that for some of the world's greatest organizations. I'm really proud that we work with Allstate, for example, an amazing organization in North America, right through to Orbit and an amazing housing association in the UK. So a very, very diverse breadth of customers. When I'm thinking about open-ended questions, what I'm trying to encourage you to think about is think about this idea of human experience. So surveys are often from channel to customer. I want you to think about touch point. So where are all the touch points that you can grab open-end feedback where you're not kind of bombarding your customers with closed questions? We think there's a link between customer and employee experience. You want to unify that by understanding, ultimately customer experience is delivered by people. So you want to see how you connect that as well. Just for context, we're a Gartner Cool vendor in customer analytics using AI, and we're also a best practice in Forrester. So just to give you context, so you've got all this open-ended comments. Your challenge now is to come up with business answers to your decision makers and peers. So our technology can analyze 1,000 comments in under 30 seconds. With that, we're automatically generating topics and drivers and then linking that to an emotional intensity. And then our AI is writing your story. So it'll give you an overall score. It'll then predict if you change certain things, what impact that would have on the operational feedback. Typically, when I'm presenting this, I'm presenting to a US audience. So I usually start with Starbucks, and apologies if you've heard this before. But essentially what we're giving you is we're giving you from the unstructured open-ended responses, a structured metric. So we're getting this metric from the open-end comments based on the emotions being expressed. So we call this the ADOR score. It's on an index of -100 to +100. You can see here for Starbucks that it is a -16. And we can see what we're trying to do here is we're trying to correlate emotion to, in this case, Net Promoter Score. But Net Promoter Score is just a way of asking people, how likely would you recommend us to an organization? My key point is that you want to correlate whatever your North Star metric is to the driver metrics that are important to your customers, i.e. how they feel. So with this approach, you can become what's known as prescriptive. So you're becoming prescriptive by saying, for Starbucks, people hate waiting in queues. They want to use the mobile app to order the coffee on the way to the Starbucks. You can see that it's driving 4% of the conversation, 14% more sadness. And if they were to address that, that would drive their NPS by 1%. So that's just to give you an idea that, you know, to an organization, if I was to say, I can drive based on the open-end responses, a 13% increase in customer satisfaction, you'd probably go, hell yes, yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much. When can I translate that into retain customers? So that's kind of the broader challenge. It's not around the data collection. It's actually collecting and translating that into answers. And what your decision makers need is some form of prioritization. And we want to prioritize not only from the emotional intensity, but we also want to look at that from an operational driver perspective. Okay, so maybe just pause there. We've got a question just around how do you differentiate between positive and negative text? The app user was friendly versus the app was not user friendly. So we'll go into that in a second, and I'll put a pin in that to kind of show you an example, so we can actually type that in to the text and see what comes out. So I'm probably preaching to the choir, but we all know how important emotion is. It's driving 80% of the decisions your employee and customer feel. So we want to move away from just seeing your customers as a metric, you know, NPS or sentiment analysis. We do this by quantifying human emotion. And there are three key takeaways about emotion. So these kind of a quick teachable moment from academic theory on psychology. Number one is that emotion is not static. So if you're capturing the open-end questions and then putting your first chart, you show your decision makers into positive, negative, and neutral, you are kind of missing a trick, because, you know, if I was to hold up my mobile phone, you know, love taking photos of the kids, hit the battery in the charger. So with emotional intensity, you can get to an attribute which ultimately gets to a more specific, nuanced view of what's happening in the actual data. Number two is that emotions are opposite. So you can then navigate to understand if your customers are feeling sad about, you know, the battery life. You know, if you're to launch a in-app screen analytics, the way Apple have done, and they'll help you manage your battery life by helping you surface how long you spend on apps and how that's absorbing battery life. We all know that Samsung set people's pockets on fires by trying to fix the battery. So Apple obviously tried a different approach in terms of trying to change that as a core challenge for their customers. And then finally, you want to think about, well, how do you move that to action? So emotion goes from low intensity to medium to high. And that can be positive, from acceptance to trust to admiration, or from your perspective, you want to arrest the experience at the annoyance phase. So that's just to get you thinking about the emotion piece. So that's just a bit of, you know, quick psychology in terms of thinking about emotion. And where I want you to now think about, well, what's the strategy to feed in your open-end responses into data insights approach that will deliver value to your organization. So we think about this in 3 steps. Step number 1 is to integrate the data from touchpoint back. So I bet you that your customers are leaving open-end feedback on Glassdoor, on Indeed.com, on Trustpilot, on Clearview, which is a big insurance review site in the US. You know, if you're developing products and you have an app, there's bound to be a ton of data on Apple and Google stores. So it's trying to get you to think about open ends, as in open-ended responses that exist out in the wild. So I want you to think about the broader context for integration of data. Number 2 is you want to then integrate that to understand with the prioritization on the emotional intensity. And then ultimately you want to serve that up in a way that will allow people to reach an insight really quickly to make a decision. So it's all about how do you use open-end responses to facilitate decision-making. So that's just a bit of context. I'm going to walk you through how you do this. So when you're thinking about data collection, you can think about all the various touch points that your customer has. So that could be, could you add an open-end question to your web bot to prompt an open-ended question through web chat? Could you just poll using existing distribution on email to capture open ends? Could you use Qualtrics? Could you use Medallia? You know, all these other tools exist to be able to capture that feedback. But as I say, it's great having the data. You want to translate that to insights. So our value proposition is this idea of speed to insight. And we do that super quick. And regardless of what the input is, you will get an overall score, to an emotional index, to an intensity, to a theme. So if you are to persuade people in your organization to make a decision, you want to use an approach called pyramid thinking. And a pyramid thinking approach starts with an insight and then supporting evidence. So pyramid thinking, as you can see here, is visually start with the insight and then you provide supporting data. So if I was to tell you, you know, Apple is -72, it's driven by anger, I can go to an emotional index, to a specific emotion, to a theme. So if I'm trying to advocate for change, if I'm presenting to Apple internally, I would go, like, there's amazing things that we're doing as Apple. If I was to go to the joy index, for example, we can see that we're doing an amazing job in the Genius Bar. We should do more of that. People are loving the interaction with their customers that we've captured through this open-ended feedback. But weirdly, people hate getting emoji keyboard updates when they just want the battery and the charger to be fixed. So you can see this idea of directionally the score is really bad, to an emotion, to a theme, to the actual comment. So you want to lead your decision makers in that approach. And that methodology is called pyramid thinking. It's pioneered by a lady called Barbara Minzo, who actually founded McKinsey. So when McKinsey are selling you expensive reports, they're using this approach called pyramid thinking, which is a really good way to think about how you describe data. So I'm just going to do a quick time check. You've all been super patient, and going to maybe just check in for any questions. If you're all good to go, by all means, take a comfort break. I'm gonna rock on here. Please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so Henry has asked, how do you drive the ADOR score? Is this an in-house algorithm or simpler formula a la MPS? And Henry, hopefully I pronounced your name properly. I take it you're kindly joining from Paris. And yeah, so I'll just quickly show you that. So we're giving you the ADOR score based on the compound roll-up of 8 emotional indexes. And that's the ADOR score here. All of these grades are statistically significant. You can then break that down into ADORed, which is the 4 positive indexes from joy to trust. Floored is the 4 negative from anger to fear. And then we measure functional, non-emotional language as well. You're then capturing your structured data, which is the NPS. All we're doing is then linking and correlating using, you know, standard statistical approaches to say, is there a link between the emotional anger and the NPS, and we're saying, hell yeah, people are really angry. And if anger goes up, your NPS goes down. So hopefully that answers your question. We get to 3 executive summary. So again, rule of 3 in terms of communicating insights to your decision makers. And then we give you the ability to customize up to 10 different insights. So I'm just going to focus on one: product temperature for Starbucks. The context is it's driving 4% of the volume, 15% more sadness compared to the overall data set. And see if we were to train the baristas to hand over the coffee quicker or to check the thermostats, that would drive the NPS by 1%. And when I was talking about the storytelling, we can add that comment in here. So you can see no one loves a cold hot chocolate. So that's just kind of giving you a context. I'm happy just to very quickly pivot to show you 2 things. So one of our colleagues, someone asked about, well, how do you actually go about the measurement piece? So I'm going to very quickly show you that. So we're going to very quickly show you how that works, that you can see here. So hopefully you can see my screen, and we should be ready to go in a second. Okay, and just bear with me. Okay, so if I was just to retrace those 3 steps. So first step is to integrate the data. So you can think about this from a drag and drop your data, or think about how you're going to capture the open-end questions. You do that through Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey. You can capture it from social. If you're doing support tickets, you can capture those as well. So think about any of that open-ended questions as opportunities to grab some text. So once you get the data in, what you get is the ability to get an insight report. So I'm just going to focus on Hugo Boss here for a second. So this is based on online reviews. So you can see that Hugo Boss aren't doing pretty well. Minus 45, disgust is a key emotion. There's a strong correlation between trust. If trust goes up, the review rating goes down. You can see that they're causing their customers to either wait, they're transferring the calls, or they're hanging up on them. And you can see that's driving disgust. If they were to improve that, that would drive the rating by 1%. You'd see there's issues with delivery and route staff. And then ultimately what the technology is doing is giving you a driver, a score, a volume, a context, and then illustrative comment. And then you can actually then record an action against that. So you're wanting to say, okay, if we challenge this weight transfer hang up, we have a target to then improve that by 10%. We're going to train all the retail staff to do that, and we're going to ask Car to sort that out by the end of the month. So that's just showing you like that idea of moving from insight to action. The other key job is to then take a strategic view of the data. So you want to then think about, well, what are the jobs to be done once you've captured the data? So this is just a quick example of, you know, the analysis in terms of brand experience, customer service, and all of that there. And we can add an overlay on that to kind of illustrate the key point. So again, part of this is just really kind of using the open end. So these are all open end text that we're going to overlay the insight on to then generate an actual scorecard. So you can see that Cambridge Store is doing a fantastic job. We see that as an opportunity. It's challenges around customer experience that we're highlighting, and we can then get a customized view of what that is. You want to then think about benchmarking and think about how you can do comparison. So I'm going to compare North Face or say Gymshark to Hugo Boss. I will then be able to take 2 open-ended data captures and see that there's an emotional experience gap between how Nike do their customer service versus Gymshark. and you can see there's something like a 30% gap in trust, and they're over indexing in anger. And the beauty about this is that you can then go in and see that people appreciate the gift cards, high quality products, and all the rest. So you can do a like for like comparison to understand what are the actual challenges with that brand. So when you get the open-ended questions, you want to then translate that to insights. Obviously, you then want to map the journey to work out what are the pinch points along each of the journey stages, and then you potentially want to understand, what are the key emotions that are driving the experience, and measuring that over time. So I'm kind of going pretty fast here, but I'm kind of mapping out the key jobs to be done once you get that open-end response. So I'm going to pause for a second just to see if there's any questions. So question is, how much is done automatically by the software? How much is manual touch up, if any? So just to be really transparent here, we haven't reached Skynet. So the good news is computers haven't taken over. We're spin out of Queen's University, the world leader in emotion AI. Go ask their professor in AI what AI is, and they'll say almost intelligent. So we provide automatic themes, and then we give you the ability through what's known as memory to learn on the fly to do triage. And the whole idea is to do triage while your coffee's cooling, so it doesn't require too much manual intervention. So that's the goal, and there's multiple ways to achieve that through the product, through our onboarding, to show you how you can achieve that. So I'm going to flip through because we are now coming towards the end. So I'm going to pause here to give you the present. And then if you want to hang on, I'm going to give you 3 actions that you can take to drive the experience. So for everyone who has attended, the present is that we're going to give you 3 complementary insights on your brand based on online reviews of your data. Or you can give us 1,000 rows or some data. So if you've got a presentation coming up and you want to show, the value of open ends, we will do that complimentary. So you're going to you get a complimentary call from myself or my colleagues, Andrew, Carl, and Gerard, and some of the other team who'll be asking you, to provide those if you want to take up that offer. What I would say is that the slots fill up pretty quickly. So this is a complimentary offer, no strings attached, and look out for that call. We usually pick 10 people at random to give the gift to. So please, if you hear the call, please answer on the third dial, as they say. So Henry has asked, is the Doorboard multilingual? So yeah, we do automatic language on upload. Our customers like Procter & Gamble use that for Arabic, for example, to then work through. So again, I'm just going to pause here. I suppose I want to be respectful of people's time. You can go ask any question you want. If I haven't answered the question, please ask the question again, so I don't run past it. And I will be following up with anyone who's asked the question. Don't get around to either. So I'm going to maybe just take you through 3 examples of how you can rethink how you approach open-end questions. So this is a more advanced approach. So I'll maybe just fly through it pretty quick. So I'm going to share my screen again. I just want to be very respectful of people's time. Maybe just thank you for your patience for attending. We're thinking of putting a guide together on a best practice for open-end questions. So please let me know in the Q&A if you think that'd be valuable. What sort of areas would you want us to focus on? In terms of that description, we've got access to data scientists here at the Doorboard. We're spun out of Queen's University, some of the leading thought leaders in this area, that we can ensure that we answer any of your questions. So again, keen to give you that value as well. Mike asked, is this a cloud service or local hosting? So it is fully cloud. We typically are a login upload your data. I imagine you ask, is it local hosting for security concerns? And we can chat through that there. So someone shouted out, I love a guide. So could you tell me what would be the most important things that we cover in that guide? We've got a whole pile of ideas about, 50 questions that you can ask for open-ended questions, some of the, research fact-based approaches for getting results from open ends, but please let me know what would be valuable, what would be practical for you, and we'll ensure we create that guide to do that. So I'm going to switch gear here, and I'm expecting the numbers to dwindle because again we're up on time, but these are three approaches. Now, someone asked, what the hell is NPS? So just swap out NPS with your metric of choice. So what I'm saying is keep your metric and keep the question, but use predictive analytics to get that prescriptive view of insight. Second is keep your metric, but change the question. And then the third one is change the metric and change the question. So these are kind of practical ways that you can kind of disrupt how you're approaching this. I'm going to show you 3 examples of how this delivers value for our customers. So first one is to keep the metric in the questions. So this is for Healthscope. They're the largest private hospital in Australia. We've been working with Healthscope for the last nearly 4 years now. They are capturing in real time 8,000 surveys a month. So a lot of data coming through. They're capturing that in real time with Qualtrics. They're integrating Qualtrics with the door board to then essentially, they don't realize, but their patients' emotions, their heartbeat is being measured when they go into hospital. So Healthscope are really, really a world leader when it comes to patient experience and customer experience. So this idea of using predictive insight to solve issues for groups of people. So what you're wanting to do is you want to capture data and then cluster that insight to then go solve problems for different people. So this is just an example. 46 patients were complaining about blood pressure cuffs. The insight was that blood pressure cuffs were driving 33% less trust, 88% less more sadness, and everyone's scratching their heads going, what the hell are we doing wrong? And of course, the decision makers were going, faulty machines, we need to fix the mechanics of the machines. And actually the open end verbatim said, it was actually the nurses putting the cuffs on too tightly. So you can imagine patients during the night were almost getting a punch in the arm every time the blood pressure monitor goes off. So poor patients were leaving the hospitals with bruises all over the place. And you can see that they were trying to convey this to the nurses, left with bruising in my arm, the cuff is too small to fit well, being told by the people, there's expect some discomfort, tears in my eyes sort of thing. So, the value of open ends is to capture this. That is passive feedback that you're getting. We predicted that if they solved that, they would drive an 18% increase in their patient experience. So that's the idea of keeping the metric and the open-ended questions, but using predictive analytics to say, okay, go fix the pressure cuffs. That is going to fix the experience for 46 patients. Now, this is private hospitals. I don't know if you've been in a private hospital, but it ain't cheap. So, the value of solving that for 46 hospitals is certainly valuable from the customer perspective. So getting you to think about, small data, personalized responses to doing that. Anna, thank you so much. I think a guide to open-end question would be very useful. Focusing on how to design the questions, how to interpret them, useful analysis to promote change. I'll be sure to include that. So it's just to inspire you to add your tuppence to that there. So the second one is, I'm sorry, just to kind of show you that good old Jeffrey and Healthscope, the value of this is this idea of, instead of saying our NPS is 4, we need to do something about it. Our patients are experiencing anger, and this is the actual story that they're telling us. that's more impactful, more empathetic than getting a number to say, go take an action. So from his perspective, he was saying, look, this gives us a dotted line to connect to the customer. So that's just an idea. Second idea is, sorry, looking at this from a predictive viewpoint. So it's using the same data. This is for Allstate, looking at product feedback, identifying issues in the product, and then making changes to that to then drive an increase in trust and reducing inbound issues on the product by 47%. So the second approach is to change the metric, or sorry, to keep the metric and to change the question. So this is using an approach called memory writing. So memories as humans helps us encode are encoded through emotion. So if you use the idea of memory writing, you're asking people to recall experiences, to rely on their memory. What will happen is they'll instinctively pull up the emotions that resonate the most. So if you get people to journal and think about an experience, they will then reflect and be more reflective in that approach. We can give you a bit of information on this technique called memory writing, but essentially for the first 90 days of onboarding for new employees for Allstate, they surveyed them to reflect on their experience over the 90 days. They identified that onboarding was generating 52% less trust. Essentially, all the goodness was being given on the last 10 days, access to, peer mentoring and online training and all the rest. They flipped that to the first 10 days and they reduced the onboarding time by 20%. We did this with Unilever, where they got their customers to journal for a week based on a hair product, and they matched the hair type to the experience and got them to reflect on the experience. And they were able to identify moments of joy of using the product. So finally, I just want to leave you, and we're bang on time, change the metric and change the question. So it's for Microsoft. During pandemic, all their staff globally are delivering engineering support. Instead of asking them how likely you're to recommend or whatever, they created a question aligned to the business outcomes. So their question was, how confident are you to maintain customer service during COVID? And then ask the open-end questions. What are the barriers? What are the things at home and office that we can remove? So based on those, we could then predict if they improve mental health, improve Wi-Fi office setup, that they would increase confidence in maintaining customer service. So that's just to kind of round it up. Plenty of examples. Hopefully that was useful. You've been a wonderful, wonderful audience. Hopefully I've delivered some value there. I think what's really clear from what I've heard from you today is that 60% have a real appetite to connect the experience data to business impact. Hopefully I've shown you how you can start in that journey by reframing your open ends and then using emotional intensity to quantify that and then to present that in a storytelling approach. So all I have to do is to thank you and look out for that guide. And hopefully you'll take us up on your 3 insights, fully complimentary. And we look forward to hearing you in the days and weeks ahead. You've been fantastic. Have a great evening. Take care. Bye-bye.